City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the Theater. This seminar, production.
Welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars, now in their 30th year, coming to you from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. Today's seminar is devoted to the production of the Broadway musical Hairspray, with the members of its creative and production teams. We will follow the show from its concept as a work for the stage through to the current production on Broadway now. I'm Isabel Stevenson, Chairman of the Board of the American Theater Wing, and now with great pleasure, let me introduce our moderator for the seminar, Ted Chapin, President of the Rodgers and Hammerstein Organization and Secretary of the Wing's Board of Directors, Mr. Ted Chapin.
Thank you, Isabel. It's a happy occurrence when Broadway has a humongous hit, as it does in Hairspray, and I want to start by congratulating you all. I know it's not easy, but you'll tell us how easy it actually was. I would like to begin to introduce the panel. There are a lot of hyphenates here. I hope I'll get them right. Starting at my extreme right, director, Jack O'Brien, producer, Margo Lyon, co-librettist, Mark O'Donnell, co-librettist, Tom Meehan, convenient of you to sit together, composer, co-lyricist, Marc Shaiman, co-lyricist, Scott Wittman, producer, general manager, Richard Frankel, choreographer, Jerry Mitchell.
Well done.
Done. Great. Okay, it is my understanding, although you can debunk it if this is not the case, that this is a musical that was put together the old-fashioned way, by which I mean a producer had an idea and took it forward. So I believe that this all started with Margo Lyon. So what I wanted to ask Margo is, of other musicals that you've done, I know Joey's Last Jam, a tough musical about blacks in the South, and interesting musical. Triumph of Love, a Commedia dell'arte musical. Hairspray?
Well, I know. Well, actually, Jack and I were talking about that on the way down, that this was sort of an unusual choice for us, but a blessed one, I have to say. I think the origins of Hairspray are real evidence of a door closes and a window opens, because in 1998, I had been very saddened by the close of Triumph of Love, a show that I loved and believed in and just didn't have a run. And I spent about 6 months in a complete funk trying to think whether I was going to ever do another show. And then after about 6 months, I thought, well, you know, I need to try and find something new to adapt. And actually, the producer, Scott Wittman, had several years before suggested that I look at Hairspray, because the truth is I wanted to do a show about young people that would bring in a broader demographic to the theater, and I wanted it to have a lot of dance. And I had been kind of interested in Clueless, and Scott had produced Clueless, the film. And he said, no, you don't want to do Clueless, you want to do Hairspray. And I said, no, I don't want to do Hairspray. I actually didn't understand the movie, the appeal of the movie. I don't want to do it. So this was a kind of running gag for several years. And then when I was coming out of this disappointment, Triumph of Love, which I still believe in, I want to say, I had the flu, and I rented a whole lot of movies, one of which was Hairspray. And about, I don't know, somewhere a few minutes into the movie, I said, yes, this is what I want to do. It had all of the ingredients that one wants for a show as a larger-than-life character who wanted something, who had obstacles to overcome.
Where was it placed, Margo?
And it was in Baltimore, which is where I grew up. And the other thing about it is it had a really, I thought, a very contemporary style, an opportunity for a contemporary style, and it had a personality. And one of the things that I look for when I'm trying to select material to work on, to a commission, is a personality, because too much of Broadway, I think, or too much of, I don't know, entertainment in general, is too generic. It's just sort of template work. And the voice of John Waters is nothing if it is not very personal to him. And so that was the origin.
So you had to get the rights from John Waters or from the movie
Actually,
company?
the rights were held by New Line. So I began negotiating for the rights in the fall of '98, and in the spring of '99, the rights agreement was concluded. And the funny thing about this, maybe I'm telling tales out of school, but I don't think so, is I found out in the negotiating process that Scott, who had suggested the project to me, had actually had the rights before me, and I had not known that. So,
but he
anyway,
had let them go?
He had let them go, and just to jump forward, one of the great thrills of when we were in previews was I said to Scott, "Thank you for never acting on this," and he said, "I couldn't have done it as well," which I'm going to take as a genuine comment, and it was very moving, and I was delighted, but yes, he had. And then the first person I went to work on the show was Marc Shaiman.
Before we get there, John Waters is clearly a figure. Now, even though he may not have had the rights,
right?
Was he informed? Was he?
Yes, and then after I negotiated, we were in the process actually of negotiating for the rights. New Line, was emphatic about the point that they wanted me to meet with John, which I did. Now, John and I are contemporaries. We both grew up in Baltimore. We both grew up in very...
Did you have mothers like that?
No. We both grew up in very respectable areas of Baltimore. We went to, very buttoned-down schools, and yet we had never known each other. And when I had my first meeting with him, which was at Orso, I made the lunch meeting, I was really apprehensive. I thought, what am I going to talk to this man about? Because Hairspray, as many of you know, is his most sort of mainstream event. And I thought, oh God, is he going to, what's he going to, I had never seen him. I didn't know anything about him. And of course, it turned out that he is a total gent. He is just a wonderful man, and we had a lovely meeting, and I asked him actually if he wanted to adapt the material himself, hoping that he would say no, but because he has never had any experience in the theater, but I needed to do that, and he said no. And but we agreed. I gave him, my promise that I would honor his voice in this material, and that I wanted him very involved from the beginning, and that I wanted him to feel part of the team, because the project wouldn't have the authenticity without that involvement.
Was he helpful in places along the way?
He was, I think, initially, and we can talk to some of the creatives about this, but initially I think John thought he was going to stay outside of the process and just sort of dip in here and there. But as it turned out, I think all of us would agree that he is very much part of our family.
Now, Marc, since you were the first one she approached, and you are a composer, you are also an arranger, you are also a conductor and an orchestrator, and you've done Hollywood stuff. So do you think that she came to you because the movie of Hairspray uses songs from the period, yes, and also some original material on the movie, I think? Whatever. There's lots of
the theme song is original.
There's lots of music in the movie, but was the idea to adapt existing things or write something new?
Huh?
Answer any of them. She came to you, what did she say?
Well, actually, I wonder what Margo's... I never asked Margo, why exactly me? I mean, was it...
It's too late.
It's a bit crazy, I guess.
Was it different people saying me, or had you...
Well, you and I had talked before. I had asked you to do another show. I had remembered
Amy...
Sister Amy, yeah, which never happened. But I remembered you. And Marc Shaiman is a name that came up frequently among producers for someone to bring back to the theater. So,
well, Scott Rudin had actually asked Marc.
But I didn't know that.
I had actually gone to lunch and Paul Rudnick.
With Paul Rudnick, the three of us did.
To discuss Hairspray. No, we wanted to do it, and Scott just was too busy doing 16 million movies.
So it sort of fizzled.
And it just never happened. So when it happened, when I got the call again, I was certainly going to make sure it was not going to fizzle again, and it was also at a point writing movie scores where I was just at a dead end and so desperately wanting to get back to musical theater, which is what I wanted to always do. And every movie I work on, I try to, you can hear in the scores, it sounds like show music. I mean, there's lyrics to every theme in my head, and it was a chance for Scott and I to write something. I was hoping, because it just seemed like perfect for our personalities. And that required a little selling on our part, because Margo was scared of hiring a couple to write. But
so we said we would write 4 songs
on spec.
On spec.
yes, I said I wouldn't audition as a composer of music, but as lyricist, that we were unproven to the theater crowd, and so that we would.
So one afternoon we wrote 4 songs.
Oh, in fine musical theater tradition.
And they're still in the show.
Which 4 are they? Yes, which 4 are they? No, it's okay. No, ask.
Good morning, Baltimore. Welcome to the 60s. I know where I've been, and Big, Blonde, and Beautiful. Wow.
Should we take a little glimpse of the show now, so that everybody watching and yes, no, in the monitor, let's see a little bit of Hairspray. So, Margo, you're a secret rock and roller, huh?
Absolutely. Well, you know, I don't know if I should say this, reveal this, but hey, why
You've already revealed
not?
something.
I've revealed everything else.
Margo is so scared of revealing things. What we say, we get report cards every time we speak about.
That's not
She said,
true,
she said,
Mark.
don't be too, don't talk about the show like it's a success, because people don't like that. So actually, we prefer if you refer to it as Moose Murders too. For the rest of the panel.
But you were going to reveal something, Margo, and we were waiting for the reveal.
I don't know, Mark. Well, this show takes place in 1962 in Baltimore, which is actually, and Tracy's graduating from high school, which is actually the year I graduated from high school. And the Buddy Dean Show, which is the dance show that that the Corny Collins show is modeled after, is a show I used to watch when I came home from school and dance with my pillow.
So it's your story,
So-
and we didn't know that.
Well, yeah.
John Waters
Sort
was
of.
dancing with his pillow. I
Yes,
think.
he was dancing with the refrigerator door, he told me.
that's right.
It probably is, well, you know, everyone's story on this panel. And, you know, for the most part, probably everyone who's in New York City. But, you know, it's my story. I mean, I realized we were writing things for the book they give out.
The brochure,
The brochure. And I was really thinking about it, and I realized it's so my story. I mean, a chubby kid who loves black music, and all I ever wanted to do in junior high school was, if I saw the black kids walking by the auditorium, I was always at the piano, I would immediately start playing the Spinner song or something. I wanted the black kids to like me and know that I got black music, and I loved it. And so writing the show, I didn't even realize this while we were working on the show, but
Oh, that's great.
I was like,
I wanted to pick up something that Isabel said. You had said earlier that you were hoping to find a new audience for this show. Have you been able to find a new audience, and can students get tickets to the show? Or
Well, yes, we actually have just started a lottery, began in the beginning of December, where we have $25 tickets available. And how many are there, Richard? 20?
I think there's 45.
Altogether, because we also have these standing rooms. And I think, Richard, wouldn't you agree that the great thrill of this has been the
How do you get the
incredibly-
$25 ticket?
it's a lottery.
You
Richard?
go to the theater at 5 o'clock and they take names, and then there's a lottery drawing an hour later. So you don't have to stand on line for hours and hours.
Not bad.
And that's it.
So we have a very, you know, you never know really what a show is going to be. You can't imagine that in terms of the appeal. You hope it's appealing to a lot of people, but you don't really know. We hadn't thought of this as a family show, but it turns out that this is a real family show. And so I think the demographic is extremely broad, and we have kids starting at about age 4 or 5 who come to this show. And we have a rather substantial contingent of teenage girls who give their birthday parties there. And that's a lot of fun. Yeah. And then we have traditional theater goers, and we have a really, we've managed to appeal to a demographic that is particularly difficult, which is the sort of 20 to 25, 30-year-olds, people who don't, I don't think, usually go to the musical theater, and they just love it. So I think we've...
Do you scale the house in any particularly different way, trying to get your demographics, or is it a pretty standard scaling of Broadway these days?
It's pretty standard, actually. There aren't a lot of options.
Right.
Given what these things cost.
Just a certain number of seats, and you got to put...
The standing room's adorable, though, because they keep coming back, and now they dance the dances in the back.
Yeah, but they've taken away a whole bunch of standing room in that theater by putting more paying seats in there. I was amazed that they're right in the back of the auditorium.
I mean, our challenge that we feel we're really dedicated to meeting is to bring in an African-American audience. This is something that's very important to us because of the theme of the show. And so this is a commitment we've made, and we're going to work hard. We'll continue to work hard to try and do that.
Well, one of the things that I was aware of when I saw it last week is that although I think people would mostly think that it's a musical comedy and sort of frivolous, the fact is that there's a lot of stuff in the show that's actually quite interesting. And for instance, I was aware of the fact that the opening number is segregated, although I don't think anybody is aware of that. But the blacks are dancing there and the whites are dancing over there, and I thought that's the kind of thing that really indicates that there's something underneath here that's a little bit more, that has a little more meat on the bones than you might think.
Well, that's that man there.
Was that your doing, Jerry?
Yeah, it was a subtle thing, but it was something that I needed to pay attention to, and it's the whole theme of the show that Tracy integrates the blacks and whites dancing together on national television for the first time. So it's difficult in a musical comedy of this nature to bring that entertainment to an audience without being too heavy-handed. It was a challenge and just something that I tried to put in there.
He did it in the Madison, too.
Yeah, choreographic puzzle for him to figure out how to never give away that moment at the end where they're completely
integrated.
And yet make use of everyone. So
yeah, because a lot of the numbers are the 12 white kids or the 12 African-American kids. But when you want all of them on stage together to fulfill the stage, and the only time the story really allows that to happen is in the final scene, you had to find ways to get them on stage together but keep them segregated. So.
Actually, it's one of those shows where if there's a villain, it's the whitest of the white people who's the villain, which I think you have to be careful about. Let's bring the librettist in.
Yeah, I'd like to know when the team was assembled.
That's where I'm getting to.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we're getting to the librettists here, Tom and Mark. Who came first?
Well, I came first, I guess just before Christmas of '99. And it's interesting you said that Paul Rudnick was going to work on an earlier version, because I think
Did you ever know that?
I didn't know that.
All these secrets are going to come out.
But the first thing I said to Margo when I sat down, it was like a job interview. I said, "Are you sure you don't want Paul Rudnick for this?" Which I thought would be winning.
That's a typical Marco Donald.
I thought the self-deprecation would get me somewhere.
See, Mark?
And I guess you liked me well enough. You flew me out to L.A., where I met Mark and Scott on the eve of your birthday. So your house was full of house guests.
Right.
But we had a great rapport. And then we started, I wrote like a synopsis of the plot. The movie has many, many scenes and many, many characters. The first thing to do was try to reimagine it for the stage. Much simpler, fewer characters, a line that was a little friendlier. John Guare, the playwright, said that everything he knew about dramatic structure he learned as a kid from reading the synopses of the plots on the back of original cast albums. So we wrote a plot and suggested where numbers would go. We had some existing songs and tried to think of logical, organic ways for the songs to happen. And we went many, many directions over the course of 2 years, but finally we sort of had something much like what we started with.
I think it's important to note here that this was actually the first magic moment, because when you commission a show, you have to pray that the artists that you choose to work together, if they haven't worked together before, that the chemistry is going to be right. And that is something, even if people really like each other, it just may not work. And when I was looking for the person to adapt this, it was a challenge, because I had to find somebody who I felt could adapt material and be economical, but who also would appreciate the idiosyncratic nature of Waters' work. And Marc turned out to be a perfect choice. But that, I, of course, was not at that meeting, because producers, I think it's not wise for producers to be at meetings when creative people are first getting to know one another. So that was a magic moment.
When you get the rights to a movie, am I right in saying that then allows you to use any of the dialogue that's in the movie on stage if you want?
I don't know how much actually.
Not that you did. I'm just.
When we wrote this, when we were writing the songs, before Marc had actually joined us, we had taken titles or lines from the movie and turned them into production numbers. So
Mama, welcome to the 60s.
When it was a line from the movie.
When did Tommy and Jack come into it?
I came in June of 2001, after I'd been on about a year and a half on the project. And I joined it to sort of step in and work with Marc.
Yeah, I'd never done a Broadway show before.
And Margo called me, and I said, "You sure you don't want Paul Rudnick?" And
we thought we needed a younger voice than Marc.
The torch was passed to an older generation.
Now, I know that there were some workshops and/or readings of this prior to this.
Yes, well, this is all part
now
of
it gets interesting.
The blessings of this show. And I actually do believe that some projects just, have been touched. We worked, Marc and Scott and Marc, and I worked with a director who was a wonderful director called Rob Marshall, a director choreographer, for a year on the material, and we did some readings. And then, as fate would have it, in 2001, June of 2001, Rob was called off to do the movie of Chicago. And it's just a wonderful story, because Rob lives across the street from me, and it was obviously, as I'm sure all of you can imagine, a rather tense moment when that departure happened. We'd never had the show up on its feet, but we had worked together for a year. And Rob and I took a walk around Riverside Park together, and you say those kind of polite things to one another, because we were very fond of one another, and we said, well, a year from now, you'll have a hit movie and we'll have a hit show. What was the likelihood of that? I mean, first of all, most shows aren't hits, and probably most movies aren't hits. I don't know what the percentages there are. Well, as it turns out, it looks like both of us are going to have a very good year. And anyway, so what were we going to do? There we were, and
he had done a reading, but not a workshop.
No workshops.
We never done a workshop. We only did a writers' workshop.
And Richard and I were by then partners. Richard had come on with his partners, Tom Viertel and Steve Baruch, and Mark Routh, and another young producer called Adam Epstein had come on board to work. We were working together on the show, and we had to make a determination of where to go. And there were certain things that were very important to us, and we wanted a lot of heart in the musical, and we wanted no comment. We didn't want a director who would comment on the material. We wanted them to take it, as John Waters had represented it, as real. I mean, Harvey Fierstein was going to be, or Edna was a man playing a woman, but it was going to be a woman. So anyway, and we talked about it, and we all decided that we wanted this man here, who...
My name is Jack O'Brien.
How do you spell it?
Oh, I thought it was Margaret.
So what did you do?
So we came to Jack, and why don't you tell the story? It's better coming from you, because actually my interpretation is...
Well, I feel that I'm the last of the Red Hot Mamas on this piece, because I had been working with the gentleman across the room from me, Jerry Mitchell, for the better part of 2 years on a project called The Full Monty. And I knew of this project tangentially, but primarily because Jerry and Marc and Scott had been friends for like 20 years and had known each other over a long period of time. And it came up in conversations a couple of times that this musical was in flux and floating around in one thing and another. And I thought, this is a Jerry Mitchell musical. Perfect for Jerry Mitchell. So when I got the call, I simply said that I would not be interested in doing this show without Jerry Mitchell. And there was an interesting couple of weeks where actually we had to get everybody together and start talking about how this could or could not happen. But it seemed very clear to me that the director, I mean, I think you're right. I think fate did step in some way. The director in this case should have been the last person to come into the mix. Because starting with the music, and then with the story, and then with the movement, I felt that if I knew what he wanted, and we'd now spent the better part of 2 years working together, I could, and this is the only way I can express this, protect that. I could feel, I felt that because I have so much faith and trust in Jerry, and our working relationship is so unique, that I felt that if he knew how to make it move, I knew I would know how to protect that.
And were you sent a demo tape and a script, or were you presented it with live people?
I think
You didn't want to hear the music.
You didn't want to hear the music.
I don't ever listen to the
He
music.
wanted to read the script.
Why don't you explain why you don't want to listen to the music?
In my vast and checkered career, it's so easy to be seduced by music. It's unbelievable. You hear a score and you think, oh, this is such good music. I can do this. And you think, this script is sort of weird, but I can make something out of this. You cannot make anything out of it if the story isn't there. You just can't. And so I made it a hard and fast rule that I will not listen to any music until I've read the script. Because if the script is solid, then you're okay. But if not, you're compensating for the rest of your time together. So I read the script and thought, I certainly got the story. I thought there were holes. There were holes in the story at that time. But it all seemed to want to succeed. I mean, there were things that were missing, but there was nothing that was intrinsically wrong. Structurally, we needed to shore up the second act. We needed to spread the strength around. We needed a couple of complications,
for Tracy.
Plot complications.
Yeah. For Tracy.
For Tracy to keep her going, because in the movie, she gets on the show and she gets interested in the guy right away. And so we had a long way to go before into the second act. So there were some problems there, but they were not problems that you thought, boy, this just isn't any good. And
did any of the writers disagree with Jack and where the holes were, where the problems were?
I don't think so. No, we all agreed.
No.
You know, it was really interesting
could see
because
ourselves.
we went off by ourselves for quite a while, the three of us. I mean, the music team and the dance team were way out in front of us. And we had an interesting, knotty couple of months trying to figure out how to work together, how to listen to each other, where the various strengths were. We were like in two different camps for a while until we came together. So.
But then there was a workshop, wasn't there?
No.
There's never a workshop.
No, there was
Never a workshop.
Well, then what did everybody go to that kept telling me how fabulous it was?
We did a reading.
There was a reading that Jack did in December.
Yep.
It'll be
about
a
a year
year
ago.
this Friday. It's a year today that Jack and Jerry worked with what is now our cast, really,
For the first time.
for the first time. So that's remarkably quick, I have to tell you. But I want to ask you, what made you fall in love? You fell in love at the reading, didn't you?
Well, I was coming down with love along the way.
You were inventing it at the time.
But you did a reading but hadn't committed to it? Or
Yeah, this was
I said to them, my agent reminded me of this. I said, and I think we talked about this, I said, if I can't move this book, I don't want to do the show. So I asked for the reading because I felt that if I didn't believe that the story held together, I wasn't the right person to do this. And I know they wanted a commitment, and they were acting like it was a done deal. But I said I wouldn't commit until after the reading, right? Isn't that right?
Yes, you did.
But
And we were very nervous about
Right.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
The reading reflected changes that you had asked
Yeah.
for.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it did. And so we did this reading, and it was like a 2-part day. It was so much fun, I cannot tell you. These people came in and sat down, and it was ostensibly what happens in the Neil Simon Theater. They just went nuts. And stuff that we thought was good, and stuff that we thought was good. And so we knew by the end of the day that we were in the presence of something.
But what
great.
did you do between the 2 readings?
I gave notes.
It was great, and they
Yes,
changed
We
it.
cut lines, we changed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
Saturday
It's
Night
thrilling.
Live.
But,
Yeah.
but he still hadn't committed.
Well, I
Yeah,
was.
but then-
Come on, you know.
By then you were committed.
I
You were
smelled
there.
the roses by that time.
What
Now-
about Tom? How did he come in?
No, Tom's in
Tom was
already.
already
Tom's
in.
in
I come
already.
in-
Tom's
I
already
come
in
in
already.
and-
I think everybody's
June.
in.
But we came in.
But
Yeah,
I
they
worked
came
about
in.
6 months for that December reading. We
Yeah.
worked toward that one. And it wasn't right then, but we knew what we had to do, I think.
But-
or a lot of what we had to do.
And from that reading a year ago-ish, then a production plan was invented to go out of town. I want
Well,
to talk about.
we should put this to
that's
Richard
Okay.
because
Yeah, I'm not clear myself about the sequence, other than that we did another couple of readings and went to Seattle.
Now, I noticed.
I can tell you about that.
What, Seattle?
No, here's what happened. I run this theater in San Diego, the Globe Theater, and some of my problem. Oh, you don't really want to hear this, but some of my problem is I work outside the Globe and I work with the Globe, and I always have to find projects that I think are containable that I can use at the Globe, because then I'm not working 2 careers. And so I knew that Hairspray was too big. We could not possibly go to the theater in San Diego with Hairspray with its 1,900 people. But I was also working on another play, which will be opening this Thursday at the Matthew Barrymore Theater, called Imaginary Friends. And that was coming into fruition to be done at the Globe. So I'm still not committed to Hairspray until I hear this reading. And then this reading is really great. So they say, okay, we're going to do this in September. And I said, I can't do it in September because I'm doing Imaginary Friends at the Globe. And Margo hit the ceiling. She just hit the ceiling. And she said, you can't do this. And I said, it's my theater. I can't shoot my own people in the foot here. I can't do anything about it. There's the commitment. I can't do it. So she said, well, when can you do this show? Just like that.
God, I don't remember that. I totally blocked that.
Oh, well, when can you do it? And I said quite calmly, I am available from March until August. And she said, we'll take it. And then we found Seattle. You guys found Seattle.
Yeah,
Because Jerry and I insisted that we go out.
That story is actually the punchline to another common, question that we're asked is, the opening in August worked out so wonderfully for us. People said, how did you get the idea to open in August? Where did that brilliant idea came from? And Seattle worked out wonderfully as well, and both of them were actually a product of the fact that he said, I have from March 16th to August 20th, and then I'm gone.
Right.
And we had to fit in the readings, the out-of-town, and the opening in New York. We had opened other shows in August, so it wasn't something we shied from. I mean, we knew it wasn't as bad as people have said it is. Traditionally said, but it really just was a function of his schedule.
Now, you said, which is true, that you were part of Tom Vertel and Steve Baruch and
Mark
Rouse and you. I noticed, if I counted correctly, that there are 17 names, 2 groups, 2 companies, and 1 set of initials.
I'm so glad you did that because people ask me how many, and I
Well, I want to know who they are. I mean, these are the producers. These are people who have billing on the title page somewhere. Margo does come first, which I've always thought meant that it was her project to begin with, which seems to be accurate. And obviously Richard and his gang came, if not seconds, soon on, but just generally,
well, the way
who were
it
the
happened
rest?
was that when I first decided to, actually when I had optioned the material in the spring of '89, I had been introduced to this young guy who was then 25, 26 years old, Adam Epstein. And one of the things I love to do, I'm a former teacher, so one of the things I love to do is sort of teach producing. And he wanted to come on board. He loves musicals, and he had access to funding. And so I said, come on board, and we'll do it together. So he came on, and that was, and then he went through the process of Marc, Scott, Marc, and then when we had the before we had the first reading in 2000, May of 2000. I don't mean to correct you, but I actually have that in my notes. We needed a general manager, and I asked Richard if he would general manage at that point. He had not committed as a co-producer or anything. He just came down. And Richard and his partners came down, and they loved the show. And so they said, yes, we want to be partners. So then there were three of us, three entities. Right. And then I think that's what it was until we had had that reading a year ago.
I mean, the idea of the I'm surprised actually that people are still surprised about the number of people over the title in shows. Some of them are very active and work continually. Some work just at various stages of the enterprise, and there are some people for whom it's the price of a large investment. But these shows costing $10.5, $11 million, there really is no other way to do it. And the system works, I think, really very well these days. It's almost impossible to run an enterprise this size with the legendary lone producer that everyone talks about. I would like to see them running a show that spends $500,000 a week and keep track of it all and do all of the marketing and do all of the management and administration. Or those shows used to open and recoup in 6 or 7 months. And if they lost money, they lost a relatively modest amount of money. These things can sink you. If you try and do it yourself, they can be career-ending. So people are loath to do it. So this system has developed, and frankly, I think it works quite well. There's always a core of a lead producer and a few other people who do the actual work. Everyone else is generally are people who are involved in a great many shows, so their opinions are very worthwhile. They usually have something to add to the process. The risk is spread, and everyone lives to fight another day if the show loses, as opposed to being out of business.
I think that's very well said.
That was beautifully put, Richard. Exactly right.
Can I assume, though, that all those people give their notes to you or to you, and not to the rest of you?
Yes, there's always a, with us it's Margo, and on this show, there always is a designated hitter, so to speak, that all of the producers give all of their notes to. And we pride ourselves on all of our shows that we don't bother the artists with that we protect the artists against the opinions of everyone else. Everything is focused. Yeah. The producers speak with one voice. Any arguments that they have between them are fought, but privately, right. And then someone is designated to go talk to the artists about it.
I also, since we're here, can we assume from what you just said that the cost of Hairspray was between $10.5 and $11?
It was $10.5.
And the weekly running costs are $500,000?
About $500.
Did you make money in
Less
Seattle?
Than that. We did make money in Seattle. Going out of town costs about the other common question is, why do these things cost $10.5 million? Going out of town the way we did, with a full-blown out-of-town, full boat, everyone there, designers, associates, trying to do the Broadway show out of town, costs about $2 million. So you can deduct that from the 10.5 right away. We made about 8 in Seattle, so the net cost to us was about $1.2 million.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was about actually very similar numbers.
You don't mean we made 8?
Well,
with
the deal that was made with regard to the ticket income,
we didn't lose. Yeah.
The net cost to us was like 1.2.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean.
But the actual cost, if there wasn't any. If there wasn't any ticket income on the other side going to the theater.
But I think that money is such a valuable investment.
No,
it's
no,
so
absolutely.
great
But
for
just
everything.
To clarify what you said, that if you, as you did, the first time the costumes were on stage, the orchestrations were played, the lights were done, the set was put together, is in a place out of New York, that means you have to bring not only the physical material, but everybody, the designers, the assistant designers, like that.
Yeah, you're housing, feeding, 125 people.
Everything is trucked from New York all the way to Seattle.
The other thing that I think is really impressive, and I bring this up, not that I wouldn't normally, except that I heard yesterday or earlier this last week, that there was a show that was very, very under capitalized. And I have to say, I give enormous credit to Richard's office and Laura Green especially, that we were right on target. I mean,
That came in right on budget.
Came on right on budget. I kept saying, ugh, it can't be $10.5 million. This is way too much. I kept saying this over and over again. Well, as it turned out, it was exactly right, so it was a great job.
Can I just ask, I think part of the budgeting process is, at the beginning, is a guesstimate, yeah?
Yeah, if you're at a stage where you really don't know what the set is like, for example, you're guessing about some items like that.
And then when a set is designed and built, it's bid, correct? I mean, the different elements are all bid, and then they come in with a number that you then have to either say, that's much too much, you've got to cut back, or that's great.
Yeah, you can usually tell from the design before the bids that it's going to cost $3 million instead of the $1.2 million or $3 million that you have.
Did you have
So there's a dialectic that begins at that point.
Do I sense something here?
When is the conversation going to come back to me?
In a moment. Now, when we first, they always like the business. See, they always like the business questions, and we can get them back to the art.
When we first saw David Rockwell's presentation of the set, that was quite impressive. You could have mounted it at the Met.
How much of it is on stage at the Neil Simon?
Quite a bit of it now.
Everything but the hair curtain.
I was going to say, tell about the hair curtain, because that's a great story, how we had to fly out to L.A. and talk about that.
David Rockwell, who had worked with Jerry, you tell this part. This is
What?
the design process about
Well,
the
we spent, Jack and I, when we got the show, spent our days and nights in David's office designing the set with David.
Was David on by the time you guys came, or did you bring
David
David?
came on.
we
I'd worked with David on the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I said to Jack, you've got to meet him. I said, he's brilliant, he's fresh, he's new, you've got to meet him. So we went to breakfast at the coffee shop in Union Square, and Jack fell in love with him.
He's relatively new to the theater. He's a master architect.
Yeah, but he's always wanted to do the theater, like Marc always wanted to write a Broadway musical, but you have to go make money. So he did something else. So now he's doing what he loves. And he was brilliant. And so we went and we started collaborating with him and talking about ideas. And these guys have a painting in their house of a Ken doll that's made out of light bright pegs. And I said, God, that would be fabulous as the back wall of the show. And we went to David's, and we told David about the light bright idea, and we go into his office. He has the toy the next day and all the pegs, and we're picking the pieces apart and putting them in, and we put it at the back of the set. And you go, that's it. That was it. And
collaboration at work.
Yeah.
So
but his contribution, which was really cool. I mean, everybody throws their best thing at a show, their best joke, their best musical number, their best concept, whatever. David, in accommodating us, had this idea that the curtain for the show should be hair. Just a big hair.
Logical.
Yeah, and that at one point, when the curtain went up, you saw this hairdo. And it was hilariously funny. And he wanted, not real hair, but
Mohair.
he wanted mohair. He wanted it to be, well, it was tons of thousands of dollars. and as we kept compromising, and I think it was Gielgud who said theater is the art of compromise, as we began to do this huge elephant tango of this is too much money, what are you willing to give up? We kept holding on to the hair curtain because we thought
and the light bright wall.
And the light bright wall and the hair curtain were the two things that we said we must have them because they were Waters-esque, they were never seen before, they were indigenous to what we were, our enthusiasm, right? And we did have a showdown in Los Angeles where I had to fly up from, or drive up from San Diego and meet everybody at a hotel room and get on the telephone because we had to cut stuff out. And I took David into the bathroom at one point, and I said, does it have to be hair? Is there some other way we can do it? I said, I want so badly to save this. And we did find the compromise finally and able to do it.
Red rope it is it not red rope?
Tubing. Surgical tubing.
Whatever it is, I bought it as hair. I loved it because you don't know it's hair until the second.
But that is really important because that was you hit the nail on the head because you said actually aesthetically it's not right to have it hair. It's better if it's
too real.
It was too real, right?
It was too real. It was scary. It was sort of scary. I mean, you see this little model and there's this big wig. And you think, God, that's funny. And then you think, go into a theater and see a huge, big wig.
And you see big enough.
terrify
You've got enough
people.
big wigs on
Yeah, big wigs we got.
I want to get back to these guys. They've been far too quiet. I want to turn the dials back to the very beginning. You wrote 4 songs on spec. Did you base them on anything?
From watching the movie over and over.
So you knew you were in the 60s somewhere, 50s, 60s?
62.
You knew the chord progression that goes with the...
Yeah. And it's an era of music that we both love and happen to have been involved with projects that already kind of celebrated that style of music.
Well, South Park for one, but on music.
Well, South Park is in the 60s, but...
Well, with Bette Midler, who we call the Margaret Mead of pop culture, she sort of, also introduced
her first
us
records, very much showed the theatrical... theatricality to 60s pop music. She had great arrangements by Barry Manilow of Chapel of Love and Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Leader of the Pack. And already their original records are theatrical, and then she amped them up. And I'd worked on a disastrous Broadway review called Leader of the Pack that, in its off-Broadway form, was a wonderful celebration of the songs of Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry. So anyway, I had this music in me, and what were we talking about?
I just wanted to know if you went after any specific models for songs, or just sort of...
well, the script, like they had mentioned, Welcome to the 60s is a line from the movie, and as is Big, Blonde, and Beautiful. Although in the movie it's Tracy says, now all Baltimore knows I'm big, blonde, and beautiful. So we had this great title, Big, Blonde, and Beautiful, but as soon as I went to the piano, it just seemed like it should be a Roadhouse Blues, Big, Blonde, and Beautiful. We suddenly realized, well, this is more Motormouth Maybelle. Now this is, meanwhile, the bad way to write a musical, we learned. Because you can't just say, oh, this seems like a more Motormouth thing, and then you write this song
and then you have to
and everyone loves the song, and it seems so great, but like, what does it have to do with, well, it had to do with a point of view that's very Hairspray, but where does it fit in the plot?
It was the same with Good Morning Baltimore, because I thought, I wanted to write, oh, what a beautiful morning.
Okay. Fits right into Hairspray.
Right.
I mean, that at least didn't need to be as shoehorned as like Big, Blonde, and Beautiful, and it took, through the readings, the discovery of how can we not lose the baby with the bathwater. I mean, because it seemed like, well, maybe we're just going to have to cut the song if it doesn't fit in the plot, but everyone just sort of joined forces to say, let's hold on.
Especially with Good Morning Baltimore, because someone said, I don't know how to start the show with a girl in bed. And enter Jerry.
Jerry had the idea.
Saying, well, it should be like an overhead shot, the camera, and so then it took off from there.
Great idea.
I mean, and that's another example of how just one person, like just what Scott just said, one person just says, I don't know, this is a what's it, plus and minuses, this is a bad thing, and then Jerry just says, well, no, the girl is just in bed, and it becomes this great opening moment,
and it's
that
so
becomes a
Waters
defining moment of the show.
It's so John Waters that it's...
it's a glass half full. I think that's what I was...
I think it's interesting to note here, too, that these 3 guys, Jerry and Mark and Scott, had this show in their bones for a long time before they ever came on board to do the show.
And we tried to get Jerry... Margo was gun shy of Jerry actually directing a Broadway musical at this point, which he's completely ready to do now, if he ever could leave Brian's side. Which, maybe should never happen. They're such a perfect team. But we had actually mentioned Jerry to Margo.
Jerry was our first choice.
She says, as a director, no, I'm not going to... You're the unknowns, the unknown factor. It all ended up being great, but we knew that Jerry was so perfect for the show that he just is this show.
But he proved that.
I Jack. Well, the funny thing about Hairspray is I tried to get the rights.
Oh.
Many years ago.
No, you were trying when I was trying.
I think, yeah.
Because
many
I knew
years
there was.
ago,
I was told there was somebody else trying to get it.
And I was this chorus dancer who was just starting to choreograph, and I tried to purchase the rights to Hairspray because I fell in love with the movie when I saw it. But the funny thing is that the collaboration that Jack and I have shared over the past couple of years with Full Monty and this and Imaginary Friends is incredible. And we sort of take care of each other and allow each other to do the work because I'm allowed to go crazy and fly around the room and wave my arms like Corky Sinclair. And Jack keeps me focused on the story, which is really what every successful show is about. Like he said, if the book, you can be so easily seduced by the music, and the music is amazing, but the story has got to get you satisfied in the end.
Now, there was an article when you guys were out of town, I think, about Maybell's song in the second act, and there was contention about the song should be cut, the song should stay. Somebody tell me about that. Talk about
Oh, it was
that.
nothing.
The song that's in now is the one that,
Yes.
it wasn't, so the one that's in now was not replaced.
This is the dance I talk about how we learn to move with each other and how you listen to various people and have to make decisions as best you can, taking not your own prejudice necessarily into consideration. When I first heard that song, when I first heard the demo after I had seen the book and thought, this is salvageable, the demo played like a hit. I mean, it was very clear that these songs were better than any score I think I'd ever heard coming down the pike for a brand new musical. This had to succeed. We had to solve it. And I heard this phenomenal song at the end of it.
And what's it called?
I know where I've been.
I know where I've been. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I thought it was moving. It's actually the reason I felt I really wanted to commit to it, because there was something moving in the song that wasn't evidenced in the rest of the music, that had to do with real people, a real situation. Now, I couldn't see how to stage it because it seemed like such an apotheosis of a character, and I knew that in the story, Motormouth Maybell, it's a rainy night. They're secreted in her place. It's an underground sort of railway kind of moment. And this glorious thing comes out. And I was having a lot of trouble conceptualizing it. And I was getting a lot of feedback from the outside, from the producers and other people, not just us, saying it's not right. It's too heavy. It's too...
It's the wrong song.
It's the wrong song. And when really experienced people tell you this, you have to listen. Even if you disagree, you have to listen. And you have to say, what is it that makes them get to this point of view, right? So we kicked it around, and I thought, is there another way to do it? Is there another version of this song that would happen? And God loved them.
We wrote one.
They wrote it. and I as diplomatically as I could, I said, I love this song, but is there another voicing that we could hear? They wrote this song. We said, yes, this is good, because there's relief when somebody says, sure, I'll give you a red rose instead of the yellow rose. Here's a red rose. And you think, oh, good, we got a red rose here. This is great. This is terrible. We put it in, and it was more of a muchness. It was too much of the same thing. And we realized, the six of us, that we were lacking in what I would have to say is the dangerous end of the show. We were sailing so well, but it's like a Navajo rug. You got to have some little aberrant black line going out that is a mistake, that gives it just that kind of tensile strength. And the African American kids in the show were missing resonance. They didn't feel that they were voicing why they were there in the show. Very valid point. And we had a powerful day when we brought the song back and played it for the company, which was...
I mean the song that's stayed.
The song that's in there now. And even though it wasn't yet right, it was infinitely too wet and emotional. It touched everybody in the room in a way that you thought, oh no, wait a minute. This is doing something that nothing else has done. And we fought for it. We fought, and it was healthy. But I mean, there was a lot of resistance, there was a lot of concern, there was a lot of criticism. We kept changing. Marc kept massaging the arrangement so that it didn't sit down, that it moved, it had more joy in it. And we fought and fought and fought and achieved it together. And it is to everyone's credit, especially the naysayers, that when push came to shove, we said, it's in, and they said, okay.
And is everybody now happy with it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we
I laugh. My comment every time I see the show is I turn next to my assistant, and this Mary Bond Davis does the daylights out of it, right? And she finishes the song, and there's this huge ovation. And I always turn to my assistant and say, cut it. It's no good.
He did that yesterday.
One of the things about the song I'll never forget when we were in Seattle, and Marc and Scott went on stage, and the song used to end, I know where I've been, done, 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 done. No words. There were no words. And then it ended, and then they wrote, oh, when I'll give thanks to my God because I know where I've been. And they took the song that they had already made that was spectacular, and they gave it more. They made it super spectacular. It just was another notch of twisting and continuing to make the work the best you could make it. And that day clinched it.
And when we saw it in front of an audience in Seattle, then we knew.
No.
There was always
Yeah.
a question,
All-
but then it just went through the roof. We could feel that feeling in the audience, and it was there forever.
All discussion really ended as soon as it played in front of an audience.
Yeah.
It was
Right,
all
yeah.
theoretical before that.
That's true.
People were saying the critics won't like it, it's too sentimental, it's too this, it's too that. But the audience, the first time it played in front of
They
an
told
audience,
us.
that
It
was
was
it.
over. The
Because
Well, I
discussion
they
was
think
were
over.
we, I
just
think
mad.
we
Discussion,
always
yeah.
knew the audience would like it. I think the issue was, and I had many talks with John Waters about this, because he had ideas like that. It was great, except that she should levitate at the end, or
Oh
something
no,
like
we
that.
wanted her
Punches,
to
people throwing
heal
punches.
a crippled woman.
Yeah.
That sounds...
But I think actually it's a very good example of reimagining material, because it is true. It is not in John Waters' vocabulary necessarily. But when reimagined for the stage, it really does land. There's no question about it. It gives the audience, also as Jack says, it gives the audience a moment to have another kind of experience, because they're up, Jack had this, he said to me, this is a train, or I don't know how you explain this, we're just going to keep moving the entire time. We're just not going to stop. But this is a moment where we actually let down.
It's also
And,
it's an emotional moment, as we were saying earlier. When you're doing a musical comedy, it's a mistake to make it all frivolous, because then there's nothing there. And this is a moment that you're trying to get everybody to pay attention for a moment and feel something. And
Yeah,
But
it's a
also-
show about civil rights, and as Jerry said, we didn't want to be heavy-handed, but I think it's something that can be experienced in music more organically than with a lot of dialogue or talk about the issues.
The best John Waters story, though, is the first time he heard the score and he heard "Timeless to Me," and I looked in the room and he had tears in his eyes.
Yeah, yes.
that sounds great. Okay, on that note, we're going to pause for a few words from Isabel Stevenson.
Before we get back to the American Theatre Wing's Working in the Theatre seminar on production, I would like to remind you that these seminars are only one of the many year-round programs that the Wing undertakes. You're probably familiar with the American Theatre Wing's Tony Award, which is given for excellence, achievement of theatre and the Broadway theatre. We also have an important grants and scholarship program providing aid to off and off Broadway theatres, as well as to promising students to pursue studies in the theatre arts. As a long-established charity, dating back from World War I and World War II and our famous stage door canteen, all of our programs are designed to reward and promote excellence in the theatre, to introduce young people and their families to theatre, and the magic unfolds. We take pride in the work we do, remain grateful to our members and everyone whose contributions help make possible the dynamic programs of the American Theatre Wing. Our work is so important to the theatre and the community. We are proud to be a part of this exciting industry. And so now, let's return to our panel on production and our moderator, Ted Chapin. Ted?
Thank you, Isabel. I think we're going to start this portion of the seminar with some questions from the audience. So can we have the first question?
Hi, my name is Eric. I was wondering, how important is it to have the role of the mother being played by a man, and did that take effect in calling it a family show?
I think you should start on, this is a conversation Mark and I had, and Scott had very, very early, so.
Right. We always felt that it was important to the piece because it was true to the John Waters-ism of it that it should be played by a man. Although John originally wanted Anthony Hopkins for the role.
Yeah, he first said, I don't know, don't have it be played by a man. He didn't want anyone to try to compete with Divine's memory. Then he said, well, if it has to be a man, Anthony Hopkins would
be my
he
first
would
choice.
do it. He was serious.
There's no humor there.
Since putting the show on, we realized that it being played by a man just helps it to be that often used word subversive, but it just it means a whole other. It gives this whole other level of being an outsider and.
Right.
But Harvey plays it so straight as a woman and never winks to the audience and said, "Look, I'm a man playing a woman."
I mean, the fact that it's a man, it's subtext, some kind of subtextual thing going on. But Harvey and the audience, I mean, they just accept him as the mother from the second word he says.
I actually know that there were people in Seattle who had no idea that Harvey was a man.
Right.
We would see people in the intermission standing saying, "Oh, wait a minute, is this Harvey Fierstein? That's the woman?" And then they would be completely baffled by it. So they buy it completely, and there is something subversive and intrinsic. You know, I'm a great believer in respecting the template of whatever it is you're working on, and you can change it. You can make any sort of aberrations that you want to, but there has to be something that you hold on to that is why you fell in love with it. Joyce Carey says, "Where's the exciting discovery with which you began?" That's always a good thing to go back to. And I think that's true in this case, that there's something that goes forward from this idea of this bizarre mother that is, if a woman did it, might mock the woman. But the fact that the man has to work so hard toward the integrity of that performance is what I think grounds it in a kind of reality.
And is it now part of the template of Hairspray? Will Edna always be played by a man?
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
Will Anthony Hopkins do it in Margo?
He's dying to do it. He wants the movie first, and we said we will talk about it.
And then when all the talking is also done, and you kind of, when you're putting it on, you start thinking about all these things. But we once met with a director when Margo was first putting it. I think this is why she sent it over here, is when we met with this one director, he was like, "Oh, shouldn't be played by a man. Why should it be played by a man?" And we were just like,
Bye.
It would be fun. Because it would be fun. Right. So outside of all this other more intellectual stuff, this is very important. It's fun. It's just another element of fun.
That was a great moment. Seeing whether collaborations are going to work. When I was speaking before about that most important moment when Mark O'Donnell went out to California. This was a great moment in Mark and Scott's studio, where this particular person said, "Well, you know, I can't," and he was being very genuine. I can't find a reason why this should be played by a man. And Mark, in his, as you can all see, in his own very special way, said, "Well, no, because it's fun." And then there was this dead silence in the room, and it was we got out of there so quickly. I mean,
what is your sense of it being played by drag acts? Because I know I've heard written somewhere that Danny LaRue and or Dame Edna are interested.
That's a good distinction. Yeah. That's commenting.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing about the drag performer is there's always nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and look, I'm just kidding. But my favorite moment, my personally favorite moment in the show, is the moment that Harvey walks over to his daughter and says, compliments her, and she says, "You've got to say that. You're my mother." And Harvey's response is, "I'm more than your mother. I'm a woman in love, and we know about these things." And the audience doesn't laugh. They don't laugh because it's a very real moment between a mother and a daughter, and it's a very parenting moment. But we don't ever comment on it. And so a drag performer who's famous for being a drag performer will always be outside the outlines and try to remind you that I'm just slumming here. And we don't want that. We're serious.
In a play about acceptance, the fact that the whole world of the play is accepting without comment, the fact that the mother's played by Harvey, is sort of the ultimate example of acceptance.
Something that'll come up for us in casting, as we're lucky enough to have to cast future productions, is for us to not, on the other hand, be prejudiced about people who come from drag. Because as Harvey did, there are people who are going to want to take it seriously, who we should not.
I mean, like Dame Edna, I've worked with Barry. I know Barry as an actor could definitely, you know, as with his other characters that live in him, is there.
And there are outrageous people who are doing drag right now, like, you know, in Chelsea, who, you know, maybe they have huge eyelashes and, you know, but they could approach it as an actor.
But don't you think also the working class quality is very important in that? Because we've talked about whether somebody was too urbane to play that role.
Yes, it's a blue-collar atmosphere, and so a drag performer tends to go upscale.
They're more Norman Shearer than
that's part of the fun.
Even Harvey. I mean, that's the story when Harvey first came out on stage in Seattle in costume. He had been back there with the makeup and all, and it took us a few days, weeks, to get even Harvey to remember that, you know, who he has to start the show as.
Glamour, right.
Because, you know, once he started, you know, looking at himself as a woman, he wanted it to be as beautiful as he could be.
And that's Martha standing behind the ironing board. You guys did it right. Let's go to the next question.
My name is LaShonda, and my question is for Margo Lyons. I wanted to know what exactly you meant when you said that you knew right away that the show had its own personality.
It's a good question. It has a style, and you know, I mean, the movie, you know, with Divine and this fat girl and these very off-center characters who are at the same time very rooted in reality, and a kind of subversive quality that is not generic. It is a very particular voice, and you don't see that in a, you know, typical mainstream event.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Felicia, and my question is directed to the producers. I wanted to know what exactly are the rights and how do you get them?
Richard?
Interesting. It's a complicated question. The rights are everything that you, the main difference between rights to a play and rights to a film is that, or from the writer, is that in a play you obtain very particular rights from the author, and everything that you don't obtain specifically from the author, he keeps. So that, whereas in a film usually it's work for hire, where the writer is paid and then the person doing the film owns everything connected with it. So, in the case of a play, you basically obtain the right to present the play live before an audience. And if you successfully do that in New York, you then can obtain the rights to present the play in London or Canada or Europe or somewhere else. But the basic idea is that you're only taking those rights. Other things like movie rights, book rights, and all of that stay with the authors in a play. And that's the main difference.
But also in this instance, there's the rights that were acquired by the film company are called underlying rights that you have to acquire and then give it to writers to take from there, and then they create their own set of rights. That helps answer the question. Next question.
Hi, my name is Rita, and my question is, how did you find the performers for the show?
Well, I have to say that the very first person who auditioned was Marissa, who plays Tracy. And we saw a lot of girls, and there was only Marissa in the end. And a lot of the casting came through Bernie Telsey, who was really instrumental. We hardly had auditions at all in the beginning, and it's almost the same cast that we have on Broadway now.
Bernie Telsey is a casting director.
Casting director.
Casting director.
Next question.
Hello, my name is Amber, and this question is for the producers. What exactly are you doing to bring in or target the African American audiences?
Well, this is a challenge. I think one of the things that we're doing is we have a radio campaign. We've brought in a lot of people from the African American community who are commentators on radio. We're doing some advertising in African American papers. We've had a lot of group leaders, group sales representatives who sell tickets to groups come to the show. We've had a reception for them. Some of our cast members go out and perform in African American, I don't know what I would say. They will go out into churches, also into kind of conventions and things, people coming together for certain expos, black expos. We're going to approach the sororities, the 100 Black Men. These are the kinds of outlets that we have. It's not easy, but I think mainly because the black audience, the African American audience doesn't know what the theme of the show is, and that's what we have to get out. We also need to do more advertising on the radio with the music, so that it, particularly with Run and Tell That, or I Know Where I've Been, so that the African American audience knows that there's something there that
Margo,
resonates for them.
what about making more tickets available to young people in the schools?
Well, we've made, I think, we've made a commitment to these tickets that we auction off every day, that we have a lottery for. And we have the standing room. The truth is, Isabel, that we have a responsibility to our investors, and we have a $10.5 million capitalization that we need to return. And so we've done the best we can in this department right now.
But that's an investment in the future.
It is, and that's why we have the 40-odd tickets that we have for very reasonable prices.
But I should also point out that Margo is one of the enlightened producers that used a program that the Theater Development Fund runs to get tickets early on, before Hairspray became the huge hit that it is when it came to New York. There was a
Careful. Remember Moose Murders?
He can say it, Mark. You can't say it.
No, but the TDF subsidized ticket program, the idea is to bring students and people who can't afford full price tickets to come to the theater. So if you were lucky enough, you had an opportunity to see Hairspray in an early preview before every newspaper told you that it was Moose Murders 2. Next question.
Hi, yes, my name is Dennis. This question is for Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Mitchell. Could you talk about the director and choreographer collaboration, and specifically, what do you two like about each other?
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
Basically, I get up, the first thing I do is I call Jack.
Well, here's something.
Then I eat my breakfast, then I call Jack.
And we decide we're going to wear.
Yeah. Where we're going to meet. No.
Jerry and I are both from Michigan, which is a kind of code word for saying we're corny in the same way. And so much of this collaborative thing has to do with chemistry, as to what kinds of, it's just like choosing your own friends. Certain mixes are better than others. And we met years ago. We've been trying to work together for quite a long time, over 10 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't work out. Our schedules didn't coincide, or the properties weren't quite in the right proportion, until finally the Full Monty, when we really sort of tied into each other, and then we've been going strong since then. But I love his sense of humor. I love the fact that he's dangerous, that he doesn't care what he says, or cares, so that he's completely unedited. And so his enthusiasm is just out there. And it's very hard to work with people if they're hiding from each other. It's very hard to work with an actor or anyone if they're protecting themselves. One of the things I try to get people to do is to take their armor off, so we can be completely vulnerable together. And Jerry and I set a great tone in the room for that, because there's great permission. We want to hear from everybody. No idea is too idiotic to be expressed. We never make fun of that. We both believe, I think, in a very loving and nourishing climate, and that we can get the best out of people by making them comfortable and happy. And we both see eye to eye. We've always done that. And now we speak with one voice. I mean, we don't even...
Well, we speak with his voice. And with my body.
Jerry, did you do any research for the choreography of this production?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I spent a lot of time at the museum, Museum of Television. John was very clear that he didn't want steps that were after 1963. There was an innocence that was lost once Kennedy was assassinated, and he wanted steps in 1962. So I went back to 1959 and sort of used, you know, the twist, the mashed potato, the hully-gully, couple others, the pony, yeah, lots of ponies.
And what is the Madison?
The Madison is a simple line dance.
Because it's one thing that
It's
was in the movie
show.
and it's
It
in the
was
show, but
created
it's
in
not on the
Baltimore.
album.
It was created in
Baltimore.
Baltimore on the Buddy Dean show. They
We
did
actually sent up 2 of the Buddy Dean dancers.
They came and taught me the Madison. It's a line dance.
They
1,
do it on
2,
cruise
3,
ships.
4, 5, 6. And then there's a caller, and they call out a step, like, you know, let's make an M and erase it. And you do it when they say hit it, and then you go back to the Madison, and you keep doing it. That was the step. Sort of boring on stage. We had to find a way to kind of
make it interesting.
Make it interesting.
That was fun. I wanted to ask one question. And I'll ask this as nicely as I can, but hopefully you can. There's a taste factor in a show like this that you sort of, there's a line that you have to walk, clearly there's a line that you have to walk. Was there disagreement among all of you, or when did you listen to the audience that told you that joke is too far, that lyric is too raunchy?
Well, I'd like to speak. I mean, I think speaking for myself and the producers, we ceded to Jack on this. I mean, he has, I think, pitch perfect taste. So you were our kind of arbiter, but how did you make those decisions?
Well, the hell with it. I was alive in 1962. I was dancing back in those days. I remember it so vividly, what that felt like, what we could and couldn't do, how, in fact, square most of us were in the 60s, in the early 60s. I mean, it wasn't until, you know, the Elvis and the Beatles and everybody broke out of that people began to be who we are now and who we still have become. But prior to that, it was definitely Eisenhower time. And there was a lot of restriction. And I remember it so it was very easy for me to think of my mother and what she would have approved of and what she wouldn't have approved of, and those looks that she used to give me. And that's what I was giving them.
But there's a lyric about Elizabeth Taylor and one of her husbands, and I just wondered if that was one that everybody thought, oh, that's okay, or did somebody say...
Well, actually, hello, no, that's absolutely true, because he says it in innocence. And what we did with that was the Richard Burton Elizabeth Taylor elision is if that's exactly what I'm talking about. If the actor doing it knows he's doing something slightly dirty, then we're dead in the water. If the kid says it because it was in fact powerful news at that time, that relationship, then it goes right over his head and into the future, and that's fine. But that's what we can't do. We can't step out and look at ourselves and say, weren't we funny and silly and naive in 1962? Nobody in the play does that. Nobody in the musical does that.
It was also just, it was trying to stay pure to pure, that's ironic, John Waters' voice, which, ironically, Hairspray is his most tasteful movie.
Right, they even tried to get him to add words to the movie to get the rating.
Oh,
yeah, and he said no.
Because it's a PG rating.
Well, we wanted our show to have a specific voice that didn't make it just be like something that had come before, like Bye Bye Birdie, which is a great musical, but you know, this could just be like, well, what? We should just go see Bye Bye Birdie. It had to have something John Watersy about it, and so there was always a little, not so much of a struggle, you know, just saying, should it be this? There's a line right now in the show, a dialogue that I'm shocked at, and yet there are lyrics that we were asked to remove, and lyrics that we chose to, you know, fudge a little. But there's one line of dialogue.
Which line is that?
Harvey's first line to Prudy. I just find it shocking.
What's that?
The stains that you mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's about personal stains and laundry, and it's like, I just can't believe. I couldn't believe when I heard it the first time. I thought, well, they're going to cut that, aren't they? No, it's in there.
Well, it is a bit of a balancing act, but we agree by consensus that you can call a girl a tramp but not a whore, because one is almost innocent and the other is disturbing. So we wanted to be tasteless but not disturbing. It's supposed to be fun, tasteless, so you don't know what's coming. That it's a show that can surprise you.
Good point.
You had talked about how he thought John Waters was going to be outside of it, but he ended up being more interested. Did he sign off on the show as it is now, or are there still lines he'd like?
He is its
he's
biggest fan. He
Yeah.
loves this show. He is an absolute heaven. I was thinking while we were talking before, the two things he said to me at that lunch were the things he really felt we had to keep, or that were important for the success of the movie and therefore for the show, because people would remember them, were the Madison. He said the Madison has to be in the show, and the lead has to be fat. He said to me, Margo, no plump, has to be fat. And he accused me several times of being a fattist, which means somebody who doesn't like fat people. But we were, of course, extremely lucky to get Marissa, who
She's
adorable. Adorable.
She's great.
Yeah. So I was also thinking about the bad taste issue, or the wrong taste, I should say. When Marissa was doing the thing in the jail, you remember, and I was going crazy because she was grabbing, and we got rid of that because that wasn't right.
Yeah, all things that wouldn't have happened physically. Gestures of familiarity, sexual references that were not kosher in 1962 went out.
But did you let the audience tell you it, or was this just among you guys?
We were I felt we were pretty aware of what our parameters were, always. I mean, let me give you a perfect example of Marc's line there. Yes, that is a very tough line, but what I felt was the most important thing is I had to give Harvey a laugh on his first line. I had to. He couldn't come out, be Harvey Firestein as Edna, and have a dud line. He needed a laugh. And so there you push the envelope a little bit, because A, the audience is waiting for him, B, they want him to be funny, and C, if he takes it right there at the crest, then everything he says will be funny from then on. And that's why we worked and worked and worked, as you remember, to get that laugh, because and I would have defended a certain amount of latitude there in order to do that.
But did you try other lines there, or did
Sure.
Oh yeah, and variations on the line.
Yeah.
It's better like this, better like this.
That line went into all sorts of, it's very interesting about the rhythm of comedy. And this has happened so many times in my life, that you work like crazy to get a laugh, and you change it, and you make it shorter, and then you change the last word, and then you say, take a breath before you do it, take the breath out, and finally you get it, and everybody seems to be able to do it. You go into the outback in Australia, and the people are getting laughs with that line, and you think, this is unbelievable. How did it finally become concrete? But it does.
And also we have the Jackie Hoffman issue, which was another, because you should tell the Jackie story, because it's a kind of
Well, Jackie we were fans of from her downtown scene. As Jackie will say, this is the first play she's been in with that has a curtain.
And she plays 3 different
Yes, but when she first came in, it was for a reading, and she only had 3 lines. And so as soon as she got these huge laughs on the 3 lines, we started stretching and stretching and stretching, and then built up these parts for her.
But that was a challenge for you too, in terms
it
of
was a challenge for Jack, because she's sort of like a loose cannon in a way, and she's the most John Watersy actress actually in the show.
She's a performer. She's a performer. She's more than anything else, and she writes her own material, and she's hilariously funny. But I love the idea of having a show that would have this man playing a woman on one end of the spectrum, and a club act over here at the end. And that there's something about the largesse of the show that it can contain all of that. Again, it's what we talk about, the acceptance and the permission. It's really great.
I wanted to ask you, there are a couple of quotes, or let's put it this way, a couple of lines in it that get a reaction to the audience, and I wonder, certainly one of them comes from Gypsy, and I was told that the producers was not allowed to quote Gypsy. Did you quote Gypsy in here from me, just for the...
It just happened at rehearsal one day. It made us laugh. We kept it in, and then it just stayed there. And then there's the line you asked about earlier, where she says, "I'm a pretty girl, Mama," which seemed like a Gypsy reference, and yet the cast, we realized they were laughing, and they thought it was a Carrie reference, the movie Carrie. She also says, I'm a pretty girl, Mama. So it's a multi-generational reference.
Because we also had to explain to the cast who the Gabor sisters were. So
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's what there is. I guess there is that. I just wanted one last question. Did you have a tough time finding a logo and a title treatment, or was it easy?
Well, one of the people we haven't spoken about here who has been critical, I think Richard and I would agree, to the success of the show is Nancy Coyne, who is at the head of Serino Coyne, a wonderful advertising agency here. And this logo, she loved this show from the time she heard the first demo of the songs, and she came up with this logo right out of the gate. Another good sign for, I think, the success of a show. So the answer
Do you
is
go back? You go back and take notes during the show?
Yeah, who watched the show?
Yesterday.
I was there yesterday.
How did they do, Jack?
They were unbelievable. I mean, we go regularly. We have assistant directors and assistant choreographers who go in on a regular basis and maintain the show. But Jerry and I are people who believe that we should go in regularly and look at the work and make sure that its integrity is intact. And I saw a matinee yesterday that absolutely blew me out of the theater. They were wonderful.
I think on that note,
yeah,
we could go on all day, but we're going to stop there. Thank you, panel, very much. This is the Working in the Theater Seminars, American Theater Wing, coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Thank you all for being here.